Well, hey, Tatooine Sons family, thank you again for joining us on this short episode of Tatooine Sons, both on our podcast app if you're listening, or on video. It could be on YouTube, it could be on Facebook Watch. I don't know. Maybe I'll throw it up on some other platform that nobody has ever heard of. Who knows? Anyway, we're back with Pete from Streaming Star Wars and Lucas from The Reverend and Reprobate. And they are here to talk a little bit about Count Dooku. I was shocked when we found out in episodes 1 and 2 of season 2 of the Bad Batch that we were going back to Serreno. I think as I watched it, I became more and more convinced that there are a lot of similarities between Darth Tyrannus and Darth Vader, but in my opinion, doesn't really matter. Let's find out what Lucas and Pete have to say about it. Okay, so, we've talked about some of your favorite moments, or the coolest moments with bass, but who's your favorite bassist, Pete?
Oh, that's a super easy question. It's Geddy Lee from Rush. It's listening to him play when I first started playing made me realize that bass was more than just sort of the underlying thumping. I mean, I could go on for hours and hours about my top 20 bass players, but Geddy is probably the one that has inspired me the most. But it's funny when people ask me who my biggest influences are, it turns out it's more like he's not really as much of an influence as I thought he was. I used to think, Chris Squire from Yes and Geddy Lee from Rush and Paul McCartney. No, it's all these 80s pop bass players that I was listening to the music of, and just that was sort of the bass style I started. But my favorite, who I've seen in concert the most out of any other band, is Geddy Lee from Rush.
That's so cool. What about you, Lucas? Who's your favorite bassist?
Man, this will be for, I think, music people. They'll be like, oh, of course he said that. But it's true. It's Marcus Miller. Marcus Miller, hands down, is one of the greatest bass players of all time. He started off as a young guy, late teens, early 20s, playing bass for Roberta Flack. He played bass and produced for Luther Vandross. He produced Mariah Carey's first album and several of her number one hits. And his ear for musical composition and how the bass can be what leads that is something that I think no one else has really been able to do, but it's something that I think every band, especially anyone that's in pop music or R&B, that they've tried to imitate from the 80s. And that's not even to really touch on a lot of the stuff he did by producing like Miles Davis's Grammy Award winning albums and all that stuff. The dude is he's an absolute savant and one of the nicest guys on the planet. Super gentle and kind and yeah, just a monster.
That's awesome. All right, let's talk some more Bad Batch now. I don't know about you guys, but I think I mentioned this in one of the previous segments, but I was like sitting there sort of going in the Bad Batch zone, just sort of watching it. And then I heard that they were going to Serreno, and I perked back up and was like, all right, let's pay a little bit more attention to what's happening on this. They got to go see Dooku's palace, and we actually got to see the ruin of Dooku's kingdom. In a lot of ways on this. We got to see, the palace sort of destroyed and the aftermath of Dooku's reign of terror on Serreno, which is a lot of fun for someone that loves Dooku Jedi Lost so much, and sort of the story of how he becomes the leader of that. But one of the other things we saw in this is we got to see his throne and his throne room a lot more than we've done in any other point, like in the Clone Wars with this. And I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but it seems to follow a similar shape and design as Vader's throne on Mustafar. And we know that Vader constructed his throne to be able to tap more deeply into the power of the dark side in an attempt to resurrect Padme, if you've read the comics and played Vader Immortal, which is an amazing game. It wouldn't be a shock for me to see Dooku going and trying to tap into the dark side in a greater way to maybe overthrow Sidious, because the Clone Wars shows that's exactly what he's trying to do throughout his entire apprenticeship. Do you feel like Dooku and Vader are more similar than we may have previously realized? I'll start with you, Pete.
It's funny. Every time I see Dooku and I think about, even Dooku Jedi Lost and what, as you just referenced, some of the Clone Wars stuff, I always feel like, I always have this feeling he wasn't committed to the dark side Sith stuff so much as just sort of his own personal mission. So, as you were talking about the reason for the shape of the throne and whatnot, my weird thinking is like that's when you go to the Sith Lord catalog to order your office equipment,
right?
That's the chair you get, I don't know. I've always kind of felt like Dooku was on a different mission than Maul and Vader, and so I don't really. I thought it was interesting that was the what we saw for his throne room. Again, you could definitely see, I mean, we had seen it before, but to see it again, and as you said, spending as much time as we did there, it is very much Emperor throne room kind of feeling as well. So, I don't know. I don't think he's as similar to Vader. I think Vader was let me put it this way. Where he is similar to Vader is I think both he and Vader were using their Sith apprenticeship to achieve their own goals. And, whereas I feel like Maul drank the Kool-Aid and was he was with Sidious to do whatever needed to get the Sith revenge. And that was his thing. But Vader wanted Padme back, and Dooku always it always felt like there was some sort of political thing or something that was very personal to him. And maybe that's why they failed as the apprentice.
That's true. What about you, Lucas? What do you think?
Man, I think that there is this perpetual idea that every apprentice to whoever the Sith Lord is always looking to overthrow the other, right? Like Asajj wanted to kill Dooku. The only two that I don't really feel like that, at least in sort of the cinema sense that we get, is it never felt like Maul was trying to kill Palpatine, and it never felt like Vader was from what we see in the movies. Now, obviously, in the extended universe stuff, good grief, in Lords of the Sith and things like that, like there's some moments where it certainly has that feeling to it. But I have to agree with Pete here. Vader is fueled by hate. Like that's all that it comes down to. Whereas Dooku felt like the Jedi were intellectually dishonest. He saw corruption within their midst, and he saw his people suffering because of it. And I really feel like Dooku saw the dark side as the only path to justice in his eyes. Right. And if no one else was going to do it, then he was. I really don't think that Vader ever saw the dark side as a path to justice. He saw the dark side as a path to get Padme back. He saw the dark side as a path to survival after he loses the high ground. But I got to agree with Pete. I think that maybe there are some similarities there, but really Dooku's pursuing of the dark side had more to do with what he felt like his people deserved and what justice looked like in his eyes.
It's interesting because if you can almost tie Dooku's perspective closer to The Last Jedi than anybody else because of that, and maybe he and Luke had kind of similar perspectives, except, I mean, Luke said, what was the phrase? I'm going to get it wrong, but it's hubris to believe that the Force belongs to the Jedi. And, and Dooku clearly saw that the Jedi have lost their way, perhaps, and lost their perspective as to what they were supposed to be doing. And like Lucas was just saying, and I think that's a great perspective. It was, do I choose to stay with the team knowing what's going wrong, or do I, go off the path to fix what I believe is right? And that's almost a tougher question than the question about Hunter versus Echo, right? That's a really interesting. I would love to get more story, and that's why I think the Tales of the Jedi that we got so good, because it exposed and put light on that story that I think helps explain why the Jedi were at the point they were during the prequels.
We talked about it in a previous episode, but I think it's even more pronounced here. Star Wars is all about the gray space between that black and the white. Dooku is, in my opinion, the ultimate example of this. And that's why I personally love Dooku Jedi Lost, the audio drama, so much. It convinced me in a lot of ways that Dooku was right about the Jedi. They were arrogant, they were bloated, and they had completely lost their way. And the fall of the Jedi Order actually happened decades before Order 66. At some point, the Jedi Order decided that political power was greater than justice and righteousness and doing the right thing. And Dooku witnessed this firsthand on multiple occasions. And that's why I think he's such a fascinating character. Thank you again for checking out Tatooine Sons. And we've got one more of these segments with Pete and Lucas. So I hope you'll tune in as we talk a little bit about Star Wars canon and how Bad Batch has to walk this line in the middle of all of that. So I'm excited to talk about that. Of course, you do need to check out Pete for streaming Star Wars and Lucas with Reverend and the Reprobate. Find them on YouTube and Facebook and podcast apps, and subscribe and follow them all over their social media channels on that. You're going to want to do that. And then while you're at it, follow us if you haven't already. We're on all of the social channels, and it's really easy. It's Tatooine. And if you're a Star Wars fan, you know how to spell that. Sons, S-O-N-S with that. And of course, as always,
may the force be with you.